Hi, welcome back to another episode of Live Each Day with Purpose. I am so excited for this one because we are just coming back from the overturn of Roe v. Wade, an historical moment in our country, really in the world, because it's a lot of things that happen in the United States kind of dictate what happens in other countries. So again, I have a guest, Nick Loeb. He has been on here before. For those of you who aren't very familiar with Nick, which I doubt that's the case, he is a producer, director, and actor with a distinguished career in front of the camera, as well as working in corporate development and motion picture finance and production. During his career, he has worked with entertainment greats such as Quincy Jones, Barbra Streisand, Bruce Willis, Bob Thornton, Kathy Bates, Gerard Butler, and Jon Voight, among many others. His recent film, Roe v. Wade, actually premiered last year at CPAC. And of course, this is so significant with it just premiering and just coming out last year. And now here, Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And I actually went through and rewatched the trailer because I've seen Nick's movie and it's amazing. You guys all need to see it. I truly believe it is the pro-life movie that goes through a really in-depth history of what really happened with the case back in the 70s that no other pro-life movie has gone through. And so I was watching the trailer and there's a part where they said, look, there's a leak. There's been a leak in the news. But what happened in the 70s, which brought us to Roe v. Wade, was they were going to decide against making it legal. And then the leak changed things. And now here this leak. And thank God it didn't change anything. And finally, everything was overturned for the most part. It's now going back to the state. So Nick, welcome.
Thank you.
So Roe v. Wade has been overturned. What does that mean moving forward? Like, what should the pro-life movement be focusing on now?
Well, I first want to, address, I guess you probably don't have any pro-choice people watching your show. But anyway, for those out there who are pro-life, I think you need to first, educate the people who are melting down around you, is that this is not the end of abortion. And it is, all it does is change it back from the courts to the states. So if Congress wants to make it a federal law, they still have the ability to do that. It's never been made a federal law. And the states now have a right to decide what they want to do with abortion. And so maybe it will be outlawed. I think the first state to outlaw abortion was Missouri, which I think just happened this week. And I think that, a lot of people will say, well, it's outlawed in Missouri. And so now a woman's going to have to go take a plane to another state, fly to New York. That's ridiculous that she'd have to do that. It's going to cost her, $300 plus the hotel, blah, blah, blah. Well, for about $1.50, you can probably go buy a condom. So, so that wouldn't happen. What are the condom? Okay, for the 1% of that, go show me the receipt of the condom and I'll buy your plane ticket. I mean, please, and so the condom, that condom's going to break that day the woman is ovulating, and the spermicide on the condom didn't kill the sperm either. The chances of that happening are extremely slim. And so, sorry if you're going to take the risk, and we have to start taking personal responsibility. So to answer your question, first, I think you can tell your pro-choice friends that they can calm down, and they don't have to live in Missouri. Number one. I think number two, I think this is just it's the beginning, right? I think those folks who live in particular states need to start focusing on curbing abortion laws in your state. I would take a look at states like, New York and California and Illinois, and, mostly liberal states are going to need most of the help, because I think there are a lot of conservative states were already there. And if not eliminating abortion altogether in states like New York and California, but severely at least limiting them and bringing them down to at least the first trimester, if not, trying to get a heartbeat bill passed. And I think it'll reduce, I think at the end of the day, it'll drastically reduce abortions in this country. And I think that would be amazing. It would be saving a lot of lives. It's funny, I see a lot of companies out there offering a lot of money. What was it? One company out there offering any woman who wanted an abortion $4,000 to help her with travel costs, this and that. Like why wouldn't that company offer her, $4,000, to have nursing care, or to, have a babysitter, or to help with the cost of getting the child put up for adoption, or whatever it is. I think those companies should start to spend money on helping women with the consequences of having the child. And I think also those are our duties and responsibilities too. Now that we've limited abortion, or have the state's ability to limit abortion, I think, we as a pro-life movement should start spending our time and money in those states, particularly creating more women's clinics and services to take care and support children, and really support families, and try to get families to stay together through this and raise children.
Yeah, I've even been seeing a lot of people commenting online and on social media saying that they would really like, the prices for adoption to go down so that kids that need adopting could be adopted more easily, because
well, it's not just the prices for adoption, it's the bureaucracy of adoption, which is also a friggin' nightmare. And I started looking at this myself because I have also interest in adopting children, and I've probably spoken in the last month to several different agencies. I mean, the whole I find myself to be pretty educated, and it is a complicated process. I mean, you have to find your main agency, and then your home agency, and you got to pay to do a home study, and then go through all these different approvals, and then you've got to then there's a waiting. And then the crazy part about it is it takes a minimum of a year. Like, I don't understand why we have kids in foster care if it takes a year to adopt a baby. Like, why? That's the craziness, is the bureaucracy. You should be able to adopt a baby, go through a background check. Listen, people are gonna get mad at me for saying this, but I don't care. I'm very pro-gun. If it takes is a 5-day waiting period to go through a background check to get an actual gun that can kill somebody, like, why does it take a year to adopt a life? Right? I think if we can reduce gun checks to 5 days, we can reduce checks and processes. I mean, a lot of bad people out there are having babies. If we can have a guy who goes through, maybe a psychological evaluation, a 5-day training period, or whatever, you can get it done in a week or two. Right? The process. And really, you can probably down to 2 weeks. Get a background check, a psychological check, a medical check, a couple parenting classes, which, by the way, most parents have not gone through a parenting class. We're not sure why we need to give parents who want to spend their money on another person's baby, why they're now forced to go through a parenting class. When I know, a lot of people with babies who actually need parenting classes, but it's so, I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to reduce the bureaucracy and the cost of adopting children.
Yeah. In a previous interview, we talked about areas for improvement within the pro-life movement, areas that have actually caused division in the past. Do you still feel that the groups within the movement could improve on working together and supporting each other better? If so, what are some ways the individual groups could do that would cultivate a more unified culture?
Well, I mean, I really haven't dealt with the group since the release of my film. I mean, my only reason for dealing with them beforehand was to promote the release of my film. So I can assume between, last April and, the last year and a couple months, that these are bureaucracies. They haven't changed, right? I'm sure they're happy and thrilled. I think maybe some of them are in a panic trying to convince their donors to give more money now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. A lot of donors are also probably dumb as well, thinking, oh, well, that's the end to abortion. What else? Why do we need to support all of these organizations? I mean, I think actually what these organizations need to do is we need to focus more on localized organizations. Now, actually, I think probably now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, as it goes back to the states. The needs in Missouri are going to be different than the needs in New York. There's still needs in both, right? There's needs in New York to reduce abortion, so legislative. There's going to be needs in Missouri to take care of children, right? And so, I think local, some of these organizations need to localize. That would be my advice to them. But I think most of the big organizations or the bigger organizations, really just care about, at the end of the day, having a powerful organization. And that's it. And I think that's sad within our movement, because so many people who don't run these organizations that aren't in the bureaucracy actually really, really do care.
Mm-hmm.
They really do care about this. And I just find that a lot of some of the heads of the organization care more about their power and position within the community than the actual children themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. I don't know. I'm not involved, and listen, I'm glad Roe v. Wade is overturned. I did my part on a macro level with my movie that I think had some influence and really educated the community and people out there on how the decision was made and the ties to it. And I think now I'm going to focus on what I can do from a micro, and that's on the adoption. I mean, I'm going to try to adopt. It's very, very, very difficult to adopt, and it's a long road. So I'm starting to look at that process to go through adoption.
And that's just sad, because you think that with everything that we've seen in the history of our culture, the longer a child stays in, orphanages or foster care, the harder it is for them to transition to, like a family type life. You would think that they would try to progress that along as quickly as possible. It's just crazy. Like you said, like you might have to wait a whole year. Meanwhile, the child knows who's going to be adopting them. They've probably even had some visits. I know that they do this a lot of times internationally, where the family will go visit them, can't take them home, but visits them. They know who they are. And it's like,
that's even crazy. And it's hard to, combat what other countries want or not want. The problem you have in other countries, a lot of the programs, I think in Portugal, you may have to go there anywhere between 4 to 12 weeks to build a bond and a relationship. I don't know how you do that, right? If you have a job and you work and all of that, you just go to Portugal for 4 to 12 weeks. It's just unrealistic. And I've been looking at some international programs as well. And I find that, most of them are, the majority, I think with the exception of Bulgaria, which I think is only 2 weeks, most of them you've got to be there a month. And I just think that that's unrealistic for families who work here. I think making international adoption, quite difficult. And I also think, a lot of the times with international adoption, also they're putting up for adoption the children that nobody in their country will take. So problem children with disabilities, children that could be a financial burden to a family, their government and they won't take care of. And I think that's also makes it challenging as well. So, so even international programs have their own complex, difficulties as well.
It's a shame, just because, it hurts these families, and there's people that really would like to open up their home, but financially can't, but also hurts the children that want to get out of the system, want to find a family to love them. And yet the system is keeping that from happening. And it's just a huge disservice to the kids.
Yeah, I think there's, everyone says, well, if there's, people can't afford it, there's not enough money, this is why we should have abortion, there's all these unwanted babies, and blah, 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 blah. Well, if we took the billions and billions of dollars that we spend every year on actual abortion, and we give it to the families that want to bring in new children and help with those children, and help with their costs. I find Americans in general to be, and I spent a lot of time in Europe and all over the world. I've lived in Europe many times in different countries. Americans in general are probably the most charitable people in the world. I mean, you don't really see charity and volunteerism built into other cultures as it is as much as built into ours, which is why I think America, one of the reasons America as a country has been so blessed by God, because as in general, our people have been so warm, kind, giving, and philanthropic, and not only with their money, but also with their time. So there are opportunities here. And I just, our government prefers to fund death and fund life. So what do you want to know?
Yeah. Let's talk about your movie. So I had mentioned that I felt it gave a good in-depth of the history of Roe v. Wade. What do you feel were some key takeaways from your movie, especially with everything that's happened with this overturn?
Yeah, I think as you had mentioned earlier, a lot of things people didn't pick up on was, and you were even watching this on Fox News, Hannity was saying, never before in Supreme Court history has there been a leak. and obviously, a lot of people missed that in 1971, the first time. In 1971, 1972, there was leak. It was actually reported about in the Washington Post, and it was suspected that it was Sotomayor's office this time did the leak. Somebody in her office, and last time it was Justice Potter Stewart's office that did the leak. And I think a lot of the similarities that happened in the leak last time got the justices to change their vote before the official vote came. It's very similar to what had happened, right? The judges had an internal vote, right? That internal vote because we just got the real vote in June. That internal vote leaked to the press, just like it did. And all the justices probably got death threats who were going to vote pro-life. And so then they changed their minds, but nobody really knew they changed their minds until years later because it was an internal private secret vote. And then it came out different. I think it was actually going to be 5-4, and two of the justices then retired. No, I wasn't going to, because two of the justices were gone. So it was going to be, we've got 9, 7. I think it was going to be 4-3. It's going to be 4-3. And then you had two new justices, and then 2 flipped. So it ended up being 7-2. So, I think the interesting takeaways now and from the movie is that I think there's a lot of similarities in how history played out between then and now. But I think the big difference is, nobody in 1971, 72, and 73 when this came out back then really understood what was inside a woman. I mean, it sounds crazy, but what was inside a woman, right? When they got pregnant, right? Nobody really understood that there was a human being and actual life, right? The people just thought maybe it was just a bunch of cells, and a life hadn't really formed yet, at least in the first trimester. And the justices created this whole trimester system. But I think a lot of those takeaways showing what happened and how sort of incompetent and what we didn't know back in 1973 compared to what we do know today, which I think is a lot of the reasoning for why these old laws are getting changed. I mean, look just what happened in New York as well last week with a 100-year-old gun law that was finally overturned and found unconstitutional. And so I just find a lot of this to be interesting from a historical perspective, and I think even more interesting in how it became law and the motivations behind it. And even today, I haven't really looked at this court case, but even today, I don't think anybody really even knows the name of the case or anything even about the case, which I don't either, that overturned Roe v. Wade. I'm reading here. In the Mississippi case, challenging a state law banning most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. The landmark precedent of the ruling in Roe, which tried to the pregnancy. Okay, so Dobbs versus Jackson, it's Women's Health Organization. So Dobbs versus Jackson. So that's interesting. So now what Missouri did and how Missouri outlawed abortion, they didn't come out and make a law that outlawed abortion. All they did is come out and they said, when a woman gets pregnant, an embryo is a person. They granted an embryo a person, which essentially, once you do that, they have every constitutional protection as somebody who was born.
Which they should.
Yeah. So anyway, and it's all interesting. I mean, I'm curious now to see how all the states react. I think you'll have some states that'll make abortion legal and others illegal. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I know that you've spoken about before about like why you're pro-life. So why don't you share a little bit about how you became pro-life and what led you to want to produce and star in and write Roe v. Wade, the film?
Sure. So I think it started off when, I wasn't always pro-life. I mean, I grew up in in quite a little area, right? New York. And everybody was pro-choice, and even I was pro-choice. I mean, why couldn't a woman do whatever she wanted with her own body? I didn't think that, if a woman got pregnant, she wanted to get rid of it. Like, she wants to cut her own finger off. Why can't she cut her own finger off? She wants to take her own. Nobody told me there was a baby there, right? And I was educated, so everyone just said, it was a clump of cells and blah, blah, blah. The baby comes later, much later, and I was, pro-choice, but, from, in the first trimester, because there's no baby in the first trimester. And so that was sort of why I was pro-choice.
Yeah.
And I went through, in my 20s, I went through to two different points in my 20s where a woman that I was seeing had an abortion. And, I was sort of pseudo complicit in both of them. At the time, it wasn't my choice, but I didn't do enough, and at one point did anything to prevent it. I didn't fight or anything, and which maybe if I didn't want it, and maybe if I did actually in both instances, maybe I would have saved lives, and maybe I did it in the first instance, I would have gotten I had the second instance, but who knows? And it's one of my bigger regrets throughout the years. It's always haunted me. I've had I constantly have dreams of the children that I had at the age they would be that year, and that would sort of haunt me throughout my life. I think I think actually that's, once I started, decided to make Roe and go down that path, those I haven't had those in a while. But that's always haunted me. And I first became, I first became sort of pro-life, and I got involved in politics in my 30s and started to weigh on me and all of that. And I was married, we were trying to have children, and I'd become pro-life at that point, and I was trying to figure out, I lived in a very liberal area, how I was going to position it politically. And, I had a relative of mine who ran for office, and his position was, I'm pro-life for me, but everybody else can do what I'm not going to interfere with somebody else's rights, but I'm personally pro-life. Mm-hmm. And so that was my position. One day, Singh came up to me and goes, "That's a fantastic position, Nick." He's like, "I'm personally against robberies, but anybody else wants to rob stores, that's fine with me." and I thought about that for a second. I said, "Well, you've got it. I understand what you're saying. You've got kind of a point." So you're not really against robbing stores, right? So just because you want to do it doesn't mean you're against it. And so, the purpose of you becoming a lawmaker is for you to stand up and if you want to be a lawmaker and for you to stand up for things that you believe in. Yeah. And so I didn't think of it in that context, at 30 years old. And so I kept on going down the path, and, then I was pro-life, for all things, except, for when a woman gets raped. If a woman got raped, sure, she should be able to have an abortion. And years later, I was in a car accident, and I was in a serious car accident. I was run over. I didn't walk for 6 months. I was in the hospital, and I have sciatica, and I have pain in my leg, and I will have that pain in my leg, something that I wasn't born with, and something that I was given, that happened because I was hit by a car, not a nice thing. And I'm stuck with this now for the rest of my life. And there's nothing that I can do. And bad things happen to good people all the time. It is a horrible thing when a woman gets raped. It is nothing you can stop. It is something that you're going to be stuck with for the rest of your life, emotionally and mentally. But to then punish another human being only because we have the technology to do so today, is that fair to punish another human being because you were attacked? I can't get rid of my sciatica. I was run over by a car. I mean, if I was attacked, there's no technology today that can get rid of my sciatica. And that's not even another human life. And so I believe, although it's a horrible thing for a woman to have to go through, I just don't think the death of another, death of maybe if anyone you want to kill the rapist, maybe we should do that instead of the baby. I would be for that. And so, I changed my opinion. I sort of changed after my car accident. I sort of changed my opinion on that. I think it's horrible what a woman goes through, but I think it's more horrible. And then if you look up, a couple of the statistics, I think the chances that, when a woman is raped, that she gets pregnant, if you want to make that a law, that's fine. If that's how we're going to win, fine, because the percentages of women who actually have children out of rape are like I don't even know, 0.00% or what, 1%.
It's very small.
It's very small, because you think about it, most women who actually end up, first of all, she has to get raped during the time she's ovulating, number one. And even that, it's very hard to get pregnant. And even when a woman does get pregnant, usually they have a miscarriage because of the amount of emotional and mental trauma that they're going through. And so for a woman to actually be able to carry it happens, don't get me wrong, but I don't necessarily, it's something that the pro-choice movement likes to utilize. Incest, I don't even know how to address that. They're going to, they have to take the consequences of their actions. If family members are going to have sex, and they're going to have to take the consequences of their actions.
I agree with you. I don't think that a child that does come from rape should be given the death penalty. I think, any punishment should go to the rapist. But I also think that women who, in the most fragile of circumstances after being raped, who turn away the morning after pill, because the morning after pill, when the rape kit's being performed, it is strongly encouraged to take it before they even know if there is life or not. I think those women do need to be recognized as choosing life or making a pro-life choice when they turn away the morning after pill, knowing that if they are pregnant, it could result in there no longer being a pregnancy. But just overall, all around, I think women who are raped, pregnant or not from it, need more support. It shouldn't be so taboo to talk about it. It shouldn't be something that there's any stigmas or mistreatment because of it. The shame, blame needs to stop. I think that there needs to be more support for women who do go through such a horrific experience as that. But
I agree.
so do you feel with Roe v. Wade being overturned that this could help in restoring rights regarding other human life issues, including the rights of frozen embryos?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I don't know, because it depends how states act. It all depends on what the state does. And again, it'll go back to a state's rights issue, right? If a state like Missouri, okay, so the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe will have zero bearing and zero effect on embryos or any other life issues. But what it'll bring it back to the states, and what the states do will allow the states to make that issue. So if, for example, which will never happen, the state of California decides to say also life begins at conception, once a baby is conceived, and that embryo has constitutional right to protections, then yes, it'll affect those embryos. So yes, in some of those states it will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which brings a good question. It's really interesting, because a friend of mine I gotta remember, there's a friend of mine actually who's in the middle of an embryo battle herself, I think in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to ask her if she, how she's doing with that, with everything changing.
Because I would think that it could possibly open up any type of communication or decisions that might have been decided in the past. It could possibly reopen those to be revisited of, well, now let's take this into consideration now with this kind of being overturned. I know that there's a lot of comments being left on social media of women being concerned with, if they get pregnant and they have a miscarriage, could they be criminally responsible for the miscarriage? Or if they have an ectopic pregnancy, could they be criminalized for having an ectopic pregnancy? I saw someone post online saying that they have an app that kind of tracks their monthly cycles. They removed it from their system because they're like, the government has access to all this different stuff. And if they were to see that this is when I should, be ovulating and then I'm not, and that I might have had an abortion, they'll use it to put me in prison. And if you have a miscarriage, they're going to use that to put you in prison. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy is completely different from an abortion. And, I don't even like the term medical abortion for miscarriages. I think it's just not even appropriate. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of people are really concerned that all their rights are gone.
You're never going to change minds. You're just not going to do that. I think the only opportunity that we have, to change hearts and minds are to educate our youth. I don't think you're going to change minds of, women in their 20s and 30s who are already indoctrinated into their beliefs on this issue. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, they have rights. They have plenty of rights. Mm-hmm. You didn't take away women's rights. They still have a right to go have sex. They have a right not to have sex. They have a right to use protection, not to use protection. Right. They have the right to take responsibility. And I think the problem is, going back to the initial part of the conversation, is there are a lot of Americans today, and who don't want to take responsibility for their own actions. Mm-hmm. They don't want to take personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm fat. It's McDonald's fault. I'm pregnant. It's my boyfriend's fault. So but this is what we do. This is what we do.
Right. And
not all of us. There's some of us who take personal responsibility, and I think women today who they just don't want to take personal responsibility for their actions.
It's just important that people realize, especially the pro-choicers, we're not trying to censor anybody's rights. And if anything, with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, we're trying to give more people rights, because now the unborn babies, male
But they
or
don't see them
female,
as people. They see
I
them as
know,
vulnerable.
but
They don't. It'll never happen.
I know, but I think it's just important that we state that, now the unborn babies have rights. And that was the main purpose, was that we wanted everybody to have rights. We're not trying to limit rights. We want everybody to have rights.
They did, but they.
I know.
Even a lot of the women feel that the ones believe that that there is a child within them, and a lot of women who believe that it is not their body, it's their body. They believe because it is in their body, and it's they're growing it, they have a right to do whatever they want with their own child within their own body.
I know.
And if they want to kill it, a lot of women believe, okay, a lot of people say, like, smart women accept it. Yes, it is a child. I'm killing it. It is my choice to kill it because it's growing in my body.
Yeah.
It's hard to have an argument with that.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I know a lot of believers, faith-based people, or even people who claim to be pro-life, that are not happy with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which is just.
Oh, listen, I live in New York. I mean, I was, and I was at a friend of mine's birthday yesterday who's in the fashion business, and all their friends are in the fashion world. And somebody said, "Oh, you mean, you just made a movie?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, and I said Roe v. Wade, and most people would assume it was probably, pro-choice movie. And I said, "Yeah, I'm super thrilled by the Supreme Court decision last week." He goes, "You're happy about that?" I said, "Extremely happy." Obviously that conversation, I wasn't going around having that conversation with everybody.
Right.
But he was the person I was having the conversation with, was a 70-year-old man. And I think if I was having that conversation with a 70-year-old woman, it may have gone a little differently. But he was in shock that I would be happy.
What do you think this overturn will have, like, the impact on the entertainment industry?
Yeah, I think you'll just have a lot more people on the internet coming out and speaking about it, and organizations, with a lot more celebrities getting involved in this. Probably mostly a few men, mostly women. I think the smarter ones may stay away from the topic. I think the problem with Hollywood today is they still don't get that America is not just New York and LA, and that almost 50% of well, I don't know what percentage, but you could look at a different poll. Some say 50% is pro-life, pro-choice. Some say it's 55-45, whatever. It's pretty split, this country, on who believes in abortion or not. And I think Hollywood and celebrities who want to push their agenda will alienate 50% of their fan base. Listen, it's their prerogative, their right. We live in a free society and freedom of speech, and they have the right to do so. I mean, it's sad because there are musicians that I love their music, and once they come out with a political opinion, every time I listen to music, I can only think now of their political opinion. Right? I don't really want to know their political. I don't want, to be honest, I'm a conservative. I don't even want to hear actors that are conservative. It doesn't make me like them anymore, right? But actors that are liberal make me like them less. I mean, not necessarily, but it depends on their, listen, I don't care if they come out and they're a Democrat or whatever, but to come out and be visceral, or people say, I want to kill the president, I want to kill Donald Trump, chop off his, I mean, that's I think that that language is, I don't like that language. And that just turns me off. No different than I don't like the language on the right either, of all the F Biden shirts, F Joe Biden. I'm not a guy who would stoop to what the Democrats do. I would never wear a shirt like that. I don't promote it. I don't even like that. I think you don't speak about your president like that. I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden. I would never, ever say that. He is still the president of the United States. I'm still a citizen of this country. He is still my president, and that whole nonsense, he's not my president. Well, you're not American. He is your president. I just don't like that. You got to grow up and have a little more maturity. But, you're going to have these actors do what they want, and they're going to alienate half their base, and it is what it is.
Any final thoughts on Roe v. Wade overturned? Any final message that you want to share with everyone?
No, go see, if you're interested to see how it even got to be there and the history of it, and want to have a good night with an interesting historical movie without having to read a million blogs, go watch Roe v. Wade. You can get it on iTunes or Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it's a great movie, guys. So it's definitely a must watch. Nick, thank you so much for being on this episode of Live Each Day with Purpose. And until next time, guys, Live Each Day with Purpose, making a difference one day, one life at a time.